It's Friday, so it being Friday in our first hour, it is Brunch with Bernie. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. And Bernie, you're in the Senate, and you have a special guest on the phone.
I do. Tom, we don't often do this, but I wanted to bring a special guest on with us this afternoon because I think that as we look at the right-wing Republican House and know how difficult it is for the Congress now to protect ordinary working people, do the right thing environmentally, protect women's rights and so forth, it's important to look at what's happening at the statewide level. And I'm very proud that in my state, we have one of the most progressive governors in America, if not the most progressive governor, Peter Shumlin. And I wanted to bring Peter on the program today to talk a little bit about what progressive government can be doing at the state level. Peter, thanks for being with us.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be on. Thanks for inviting me.
Peter, let me just throw the question to you. At a time when we have right-wing control over the House, we have big money playing such a huge role in the political process, what is the state of Vermont doing to stand up for the values that so many Americans believe in?
Well, you know, we're doing some things here, Bernie, with your support and your help that are just not being done in other states. The first is we are passing and implementing the first sensible single-payer healthcare system in America, where healthcare is a right and not a privilege, where it's publicly financed, where it follows the individual. As a resident of the Green Mountain State, you will have Green Mountain healthcare, full coverage, benefits, and we all know that we spend more money on healthcare in this country by 200, 300, 400 times than most of the other industrialized countries that we compete with for jobs and economic development. Yet we know that the rising cost of healthcare is unsustainable, and that we have too many residents who make horrid choices every single day about where they work, what they do, where they move, because of a need to have access to quality health care. So it's the right thing to do. It's an upward battle for the simple reason that our friends in special interests, I should say, in Washington did a pretty good job of precluding governors like me from passing single payer until 2017 when they passed the Affordable Care Act. But we will be ready in 2017 for the first sensible healthcare system in America. And as you know, with your leadership, we're making huge progress on not only energy efficiency, where we really lead the country in energy efficiency, but also in moving to renewables, getting off our addiction to oil. And we're seeing huge job growth as a result of it. We now have more green, clean jobs in Vermont per capita than any other state in the country. So we're putting together what I call the first sensible energy policy that's going to ensure that our kids and grandkids have a better chance of surviving in a climate in a planet that is challenged by climate change, which I think is our greatest challenge that we face.
Right. Let me just jump in and say to listeners that what Governor Shumlin is talking about is not only of great importance to the state of Vermont, my state, but it is of enormous importance to the country, because I believe that, in fact, as the governor just stated, if we can in Vermont put together a strong, cost-effective, single-payer healthcare system which guarantees healthcare to all people, the other 49 states will be looking at what Vermont did, and they're going to want to follow us. So this is not just an issue for Vermont, it's an issue for America. And I think the second point that the governor made about energy is also of enormous consequence. It is incomprehensible to me that at a time when the scientific community, the scientists who study this issue, believe that global warming is the greatest threat to this entire planet, we have a majority party in the House of Representatives who more or less believes that global warming is a hoax and that we're doing virtually nothing to transform our energy system. So I think, as the governor indicated, states like Vermont, California, other states that understand the importance of transforming our energy system are leading the way in helping to cut greenhouse gas emissions, but also, as the governor indicated, he might want to pick up on this point, creating jobs. Peter, what are we doing in terms of job creation by transforming our energy system?
Well, you know, they're absolutely linked. And I keep saying, Bernie, I know you agree with me, that, you know, in my view, there's two challenges. The first is, because we're a cold state and because we have such stark four seasons, I keep saying the cold states are going to see the effects of climate change perhaps before some of the other states in this country, and that's why we have such a heightened awareness here. We've had extraordinary storms. Irene wiped out, we lost 7 Vermonters. We lost this Hurricane Irene. We lost, hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure, roads, bridges. We lost homes. We lost businesses. That's one example of our climate change affecting our state. So Vermonters, regardless of political party, recognize things have changed drastically in the last 20, 30 years because of our emissions. But I think the second point is, because we're harnessing the wind and the sun and our forests and our streams to biomass and small hydro, everything possible, combined with energy efficiency, we are emerging from this recession faster than other states. Vermont now has the distinction of having the lowest unemployment rate this side of the Mississippi. We have the fastest growth rate of any of the Northeast states. And in 2011, Vermont was the only state in America who actually saw income growth after a decade of working Americans seeing stagnant incomes, one of the biggest challenges we face. So the answer really is that not only is it the right thing to do, but those states, those governors, if Congress, if that right-wing House of yours could get their act together, those that get there first are going to get the economic prosperity. I believe the transformation from an oil and coal-driven economy to one that uses renewables and alternative energy is going to make the tech boom and the industrial revolution look small. Huge economic opportunity as we do the right thing.
Peter, say a few words on Vermont's tradition and what we're doing now in terms of a non-discriminatory society and our belief in human rights.
Well, the only reason that Vermont can have the good judgment of having a senator as great as Bernie Sanders is because we've always combined good common sense, what I call pragmatic fiscal caution. We pay our bills on time, with a sense of social justice. And it goes way back in our state. We were the first state to abolish slavery. We were the first state to pass publicly funded public education. We were the first state, we invented civil unions, frankly, and the first state to pass marriage equality legislatively, not because a court and judges told us to do it, but because we knew it was the right thing to do. So it's a wonderful state, a great place for jobs. I think it's the best quality of life, best place to live, to work, to raise a family. But most importantly, we care about each other and taking care of each other in ways that you don't experience in other states. And I know that sounds kind of dreamy, but the fact of the matter is it's just true.
Well, we saw that. As I think many listeners know, Vermont was hard hit a year and a half ago with Hurricane Irene, and it did devastating damage to our small state. And the governor did a great job in helping to lead the state in rebuilding. And one of the things we have noticed is how many people came out to support their neighbors. So I want to thank Governor Shumlin very much for what he's doing and for being with us this afternoon.
Well, thanks, Senator Sanders, for having me on. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Governor Shumlin, and thank you, Senator Sanders. We'll be right back with more here on Brunch with Bernie on the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Up next, Senator Sanders taking your calls in our national town hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie. And welcome back. John in San Francisco, California, watching us on DirecTV, satellite TV, on Free Speech TV Network. You're on the air with Senator Sanders, John.
Hi, Senator Sanders, John Manley. Thanks for taking my phone call. 2 questions. 1, will either you or Thom Hartmann run for presidency? And number 2, can we get President Obama to do something about the elections? Because, again, the Republicans are bragging about stealing the elections, and maybe withhold federal highway funds or something like that in order to make it a fair election for the entire country and not have it stolen again by the Republicans. Thank you.
All right, John, thank you very much, and thanks for your support. Let me deal with your second question. You know, in politics, and I've been in politics for a while, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But it has always struck me as not only being extraordinarily anti-American, but anti-democratic, anti-everything the average American believes in, that you think you should win elections by, among other things, making it impossible or very difficult for your fellow American to participate in that election through voter suppression, or that you have to depend upon billionaires and the Citizens United Supreme Court decision in order to pump huge amounts of money into your campaign in order to win. So I think John raises an enormously important point, and that is, if we're going to be calling ourselves a true democracy, we need real campaign finance reform, which means not only overturning this disastrous Supreme Court decision. And I was reminded this afternoon talking to somebody, said, well, you know, yeah, a lot of money came in. Mitt Romney had the super PAC. It didn't really work. Wrong. If you look at states like Michigan, super PAC money and Citizens United played a devastating role in defeating workers' rights and turning that state into a right-to-work state. So super PAC money has had an influence. We have got to deal with that issue. We have also got to deal with the issue of voter suppression, and that there is legislation, and I will be strongly supporting it, which will make it impossible for states to come up with obstructionism and ways to prevent lower-income people or older people from voting. This is a huge issue, and we have got to fight for that. Again, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But you should not lose because Americans are unable to vote.
And then there's also gerrymandering. The Republicans yesterday were bragging about how the Democrats won 1.4 million more votes in the House of Representatives, yet the Republicans held the House because of the 2010 census and the gerrymandering that they did.
No, that's exactly right.
It's just a remarkable thing. It's so anyway, we've got about just 10, 15, 20 seconds until we're back from the break. So,
well, let me just pick up then, if I can, on some of what Governor Peter Shumlin of Vermont pointed out, and that is, while we have got to absolutely fight the important fights here in Washington, we cannot ignore the important role that state and local government plays as well. So I hope that people pay attention not only to Washington, which we have to do obviously, but also to what's happening in their state capitals.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us, our Brunch with Bernie hour. Check out his website, sanders.senate.gov. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Senator Sanders. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders taking your questions. And Kelly in Berkeley, California, listening on Sirius Satellite Radio. You are on the air, Senator Sanders.
Okay, great. Thank you. I love your show.
Thank you.
Senator Sanders, you often talk about lifting the cap on withholding for Social Security to save Social Security forever. And I wondered how, if we lift that cap, how would that affect the benefits that are paid out? So if someone with $1 million salary is paying that FICA tax on the whole thing, does that mean that we would really lose what we gain by paying out bigger benefits?
No. I mean, if people who are earning $1 million are going to pay more into the fund, are they going to end up with some extravagant Social Security package? The answer is simply no. We'll have to adjust it and deal with that, but it would be absurd. Social Security is not a program to make people wealthy. The goal of lifting the cap is to make sure that Social Security remains solvent for the next 75 years. Right now it is good for 21 years, at which point it pays out 75–80% of what we need. We got to fill that 20% cap, and the way to do it is to lift the cap. And by the way, you don't have to start at 113. You can start at somewhere around 250,000.
Donna in Palatine, Illinois, listening to WCPT. You're on the air, Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders and Tom. My question has to do with if you're calling in to your senator or your representative to express your views on different issues. And let's say you had two issues that you wanted to call in on, say the filibuster reform or gun control. Does it have a bigger impact if you make two calls, or can you just make one call and give both opinions on the same call? And I mean, I was just wondering what kind of impact that has on the senator, and I mean, how would... Well,
right. It depends. What happens is when you call, the person who answers your call will take notes and write down what you said. If you're concerned about two issues between you and me, it probably makes more sense to make two separate calls so that you can get registered for A and B. Sometimes the clerk who's answering the phone may just put down one rather than the two.
Okay. Tom, one of our podcast listeners in Canoga Park, California. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, that's me. Hi, Senator.
Hi.
I honor your courage to do this. I'm not even one of your constituents, and you're willing to answer perhaps a tough question. I'm going to make this really short and sweet, just a few sentences. My question is, how does the Senate decide what and how much of the defense budget to cut? Now, I've heard that not all senators are privy to the specifics of the various defense projects and weapon systems. It's kind of viewed as a security risk to have all the senators know all the details. But specifically, I'd like to know, how is the trust derived in your fellow senators who may be on one of those defense-related committees? Even if those senators are not from your party, and since you're an independent, none of them are from your party, is there essentially a black hole as far as the trust is concerned? And does that black hole coincide with a black budget? And my last sentence, how can you make a decision about the defense budget if you aren't even allowed to know the details about projects that may be black and consequently have black budgets?
Okay, thanks, Tom. I suspect that there are projects that are clandestine, that do not go out of the committee, but I think that is much more the case with the Intelligence Committee. In fact, for a number of years, information regarding the size of the intelligence budget was not made public, although I think the media was close to guessing what it would be. So I think the question you're asking is much more appropriate for the Intelligence Committee, which is largely a fairly secret document. In terms of the defense budget, which will be somewhere around $600 billion, the largest budget of any government agency by far, I think we do know where most of that money, in fact, is going. My own view is that clandestine or otherwise, we can make judicious cuts in military spending, maintain the strong defense that we need, and yet save substantial sums of money. I would point out there is a massive amount of defense contractor fraud that takes place. There are a lot of overruns where companies come in and say, we'll build this weapon system for X dollars, and it ends up being substantially more. We have a situation where the military is contracting out in areas where in-house work and government employees could do that same job for substantially less. So to answer your question, much of the Defense Department, as I understand it, is in fact public information. We do know where it goes. I think it should be reduced.
Ryan in Spokane, Washington. Quick one for Senator Sanders. We have about a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had a quick question. I'm a pipe fitter journeyman for a union, and I install gas right up to someone's home. And my question is basically, with all the natural gas that we have, and knowing that it's cheap to convert a car to natural gas, and knowing we could fill them in our garage, do you feel like there's a reason we're not using our natural gas? And if so, do you think this has anything to do with them, the government, actually trying to keep the middle class poor?
No, I don't think there is a lot of reasons why the middle class is disappearing. I don't think this is one of them. I think, as I understand it, there are now truckers, bus companies that are using natural gas, and I certainly think that it is something we should look at in terms of cleaner fuel for automobiles.
Okay, we'll be back with more of Senator Bernie Sanders. "34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour here, our national town hall meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders, taking your calls. Bernie, you're back with us?
I'm right here, Tom.
Okay, great. Jeff, is it Minong, Wisconsin? Am I saying that right, Jeff?
Hello.
Jeff, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Okay, I was curious. It seems like the people that don't like abortion clinics and family health care, whatever, that kind of stuff, are the same ones that don't want food stamps and other things. But if we had health care and things for women so they wouldn't have more children, perhaps we wouldn't need people eating more food stamps.
Well, Jeff, you make an interesting point. What and I should say that I have always been pro-life, pro-choice, and believe that the issue about whether or not a woman has an abortion is the woman and her physician and not the United States government. But I always find it interesting that the so-called pro-life people worry very little in many cases about what happens to the kids who are born. And it's not just food stamps, it's child care, it's education. It seems to me that if one really were pro-life, one would want to make sure that our children have the kinds of upbringing and the opportunities that kids in many other countries around the world have. And sadly, that is not the case. Right now, in America, we have by far the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. Well over 20% of our kids are living in poverty. We have a horrendous situation with regard to child care. Many, many working families find it extraordinarily difficult to find decent quality, affordable child care, way behind many other countries in that regard. It would seem to me that if you're really pro-life, among other things, that when a woman had a baby, you would want to make sure that that woman and that father could stay home and nurture that kid during the first 4, 5, 6 months of life. Many countries have strong parental leave programs. We in the United States don't. As a matter of fact, there's an article in the last edition of the Bernie Buzz, our newsletter, that deals just with this issue and contrasts how we treat our kids and families as opposed to what goes on in many countries in Europe. And you can get that at sanders.senate.gov. But so that's my viewing. I think I find it hard to understand how there are folks out there who say, no, under no circumstances can a woman have an abortion, but when women do have babies, they really don't get the kind of support that they often need.
Yeah. And but that said, there's also a group called Democrats for Life. I am pro-choice, but there's a pro-life group of progressive Democrats out there. And the Catholic Church, there are some real aggressive progressives in the Catholic Church who are pro-life, and they're like the nuns on the bus. They're traveling all around the country. So
yeah, that is
really
true.
It's really complex.
But it's true, but we don't see that type of attitude by and large here in the United States Congress. There are exceptions to the rule, but that is not the case here.
Lee in Hendersonville, Tennessee. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
How you doing, Senator Sanders and Tom? Great to be on your show. Senator Sanders, I know that Vermont is always out front on new and bold things, and with the potential to have a single payer that's coming down the pipe, is it possible, since we'll soon buy insurance across state lines, is it possible to also buy insurance from Vermont that's a single payer?
I think not, Lee. The single payer will be limited to the 630,000 people in the state of Vermont. But we hope that by setting the example, by doing it right, by showing that you could provide quality health care to all of our people, and when you do that, through a single-payer system, you save substantial sums of money. You create a situation where you can control to a far greater degree than currently the escalating cost of health care, that when Vermont goes forward, it will become a model for the rest of this country. And I would hope very much that Tennessee and other states will not be far behind. But that's kind of where we are right now in Vermont.
Arlene in Pine Mountain, Georgia. You're on the air with Bernie, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
I'm a long-time listener but first-time caller. And basically the question I wanted to ask was something you had already touched on about these gerrymandered districts. I just wanted to know what could be done about it. I mean, isn't it a subversion of democracy when the districts, they propose that they're going to try to even, gerrymander them some more, so that many more people may vote, for example, Democratic, but they will still elect many more Republicans to their state houses and to Washington, and possibly even change the outcome of the next presidential election. I mean, what exactly could be done about that?
Arlene, that is an excellent question, and it's one, to be honest with you, that I can't give you the kind of answer you deserve on that. But it is a very serious problem, and I haven't thought through exactly what the remedies are. Gerrymandering, by definition, I think, Tom, that was named after a guy, the Revolutionary War period?
Yeah, I'm not sure when it was, but it was in the early part of the 19th century, late 18th century. Yeah.
So the concept of majority parties manipulating districts for their advantage is nothing new. It's gone on for a couple of hundred years. What I think we are seeing recently is our Republican friends taking this to a whole new level, which I think does raise certain constitutional issues. And I think also what Arlene is talking about is now apparently some of our Republican friends are trying to devise ways that they can win elections without winning a majority support, are thinking of breaking up states into electoral districts, which will work to their advantage. So I think there is a significant role. Obviously, at the moment, this is mostly a statewide issue. But I think there is a role, certainly for the federal courts and for the Congress to contemplate. But Arlene, I apologize. At this moment, I can't tell you exactly what that remedy might be.
Dave in Paramus, New Jersey. You're on the air with Senator Bernie Sanders.
I thank you very much, Senator. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to Tom, and I appreciate everything you're doing. My question has about 6 or 7 parts. It's about the upcoming debt ceiling increase and the national debt obligations. If the Tea Party in the House, as threatened, does actually force our government into default by not allowing a temporary rise in the debt ceiling and payment of our legal debt obligations, if this was a corporation and it defaulted on some of its debt, the default is global and applies to all of the debt. It goes to zero and the corporation is at bankruptcy. If this also applies to our government debt, what happens to all of the $16.4 trillion of our debt? Does it become worthless? And if so, some of that debt is owed to Social Security, some to the domestic banking system, and some to the international banking system. What effect would this default have on them? What would be the new value of the U.S. dollar domestically and in the worldwide currency market? What effect would this have on the global banking system and global economies, including the U.S. economy?
Well, Dave, let me jump in and interrupt you because you've raised the right points. And the answer is, you know what, Dave? Nobody knows, because what our right-wing Republican Tea Party friends are talking about is absolutely unprecedented. Nobody knows the answer to your questions. But this I will tell you, and this is, of course, what you are suggesting. The results could be absolutely catastrophic, not only for the United States of America, but for the entire world's financial system. Think about it. The world's largest economy, the world's most powerful nation, for the first time in its history, defaults on its debts, does not pay what it is owed. This could bring massive financial instability all over the world. What the president has said, and I agree with him, is this cannot be something that you negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate. It is a disaster. It cannot be allowed to happen. Right now, the Republican brand, if you like, is sinking rapidly. More and more Americans understand that these guys, the right wing of the Republican Party, is way out of touch with mainstream America in terms of their ideas, their values, and what they're voting for. I believe that if they go forward and push this country into default, they will never, ever recover from that. Because what they will do will lead not only to financial instability, it will lead to more and more loss of jobs, higher interest rates, enormous pain for the American people. I think, by the way, that some of these guys are beginning to catch on to that and may be backing off. But this is not an issue that can be negotiated. It is an insane, disastrous idea. It must not happen.
Bernie, apparently, we just have 45 seconds to the break. Apparently, Eric Cantor and John Boehner think that if they can keep bringing this up every 3 months, it'll give them an opportunity every 3 months to remind America that, in their phrase, Obama is borrowing money, or, you know, right. Entitlements are a problem.
Really, that's right, Tom, and they really think the American people are very, very dumb, and I don't think so. Remember, here's the main point to be made. Mitch McConnell and these guys say that revenue is off the table. I want everybody to understand that today, at 15.7% of GDP, our revenue, the amount of money coming into the federal government, is almost the lowest that it has been in 60 years. So revenue must be on the table. There are progressive and fair ways to raise that revenue.
Welcome back. And Noah in Madison, Wisconsin, watching on Free Speech TV on DirecTV. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, good to be with you. Senator Sanders, I was wondering if you could answer this question honestly, as best you can. Is the Federal Reserve System a government-owned agency accountable to the people? And if not, what can be done about it? And also, could you explain what an executive order is? Thank you.
My phone is popping in and out here. Was the question on the Federal Reserve, Tom?
Yeah, he asked two questions. One was, is the Federal Reserve an actual federal agency? And then the second one was, could you explain what an executive order is?
Yeah. The Federal Reserve is a quasi-federal agency. The chairman of the Fed, who is now Ben Bernanke, is appointed by the President of the United States with the approval of the United States Senate. And other members of the Fed are similarly appointed. At the regional level, what you have is members of the Fed who come from the banking committee in a very significant way. For example, the most important of all the regional Feds, obviously, is the New York Fed, which has jurisdiction over Wall Street. Recently, up until very recently, Jamie Dimon, who was the CEO and president of J.P. Morgan Chase, was on the New York Fed. There are 3 people out of, I think the number is 9, who come right from the banking community. So what you have is, in some ways, the Fed is a government agency in the sense that members are appointed by the president and the Senate. On the other hand, you have a number of the regional Feds dominated by the banking industry. What I am working on and have introduced is legislation to democratize the Fed in a very significant way, and that is to get rid of representatives from the banking committee from the banking industry serving on the Fed. I think the idea of having the fox guard the hen house makes no sense at all. We've introduced legislation to do that. Second of all, I was successful in getting an amendment passed as part of the financial reform bill, which for the first time gave us an audit of the Fed during the financial crisis, which was really eye-opening because we learned that the Fed made $16 trillion of very low-interest loans available to every major financial institution in this country and many institutions around the world. So there's a lot of work to be done in democratizing the Fed, making it accountable to the middle class of this country rather than where it is right now, primarily accountable to Wall Street.
And then executive orders, if you could explain.
An executive order is, legislation to be passed has to go through the House and Senate and be signed by the President. There are things that the President has the unilateral capability of doing. He can say, I'm issuing an executive order to do A, B, and C, just coming from the White House without the need for approval of the Congress.
And those things have to be within the context of laws already passed by Congress.
Exactly, and they're much more limited than any major piece of legislation.
Brunch with Bernie, our weekly hour-long town hall meeting here with a nationwide town hall meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders will continue in just a moment. 49 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. Brunch with Bernie, our national town hall meeting with Senator Sanders answering your questions. Peter in Voorheesville, New York, watching on Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good afternoon, Senator Sanders. My question concerns a lot of your veterans in Vermont and myself. It's why are service-connected compensations rates already cut 50% of what they should be? I'll give you an example. 100% is $2,800 or $31 from $2,800, and therefore 10% should be $280. Well, it's actually $127. That's 4.5%, and that's less than 50% of what it should be. And 50% should be $1,400, half of $2,800, and it's $797. I'll wait for your answer, and I know there's a lot of veterans interested in this. Thank you.
Well, Peter, within a few days, I'm going to become chairman of the Veterans Committee, and this is an issue that I promise you we will look at. My immediate concern, by the way, Peter, is that if this so-called chain CPI being pushed by the Republicans and some Democrats go through, whatever disabled vets are getting now will be significantly lowered. There are folks who want to essentially move to a deficit reduction, not only by cutting Social Security, but by cutting veterans programs as well. But Peter, thank you very much. And by the way, if there are any veterans who are listening to the show, and I know there are many, please do not hesitate to get on the phone and tell me some of the issues that you are concerned about, and I will do my best to try to address them.
John in Ogden, Utah. You're on the air, Senator Sanders.
Yeah, hi, Senator Sanders. Thank you for your service and all your great ideas. I want to know how we can get the American people to realize that government is not a business. It is a nonprofit legislative body that are supposed to allocate our tax dollars for us and to benefit us and not, pay for other countries, not pay for subsidies to big business. It's supposed to be investing in the country to make it better. And I don't understand why we're electing CEOs and, business makers when that's not what our government's supposed to do. We don't make a profit, and I don't know how to get America to realize that. And once they realize that, maybe we can go towards universal health care, towards education for all.
Well, John, I got the question, and I think you raised an important point, and it gets back to an earlier question. And what you're really asking is, how do you make government responsive to the needs of ordinary Americans, which certainly is not the case right now. And that takes you back to elections. It takes you back to how do candidates fund their campaigns, which is primarily based on going out to wealthy people. And with Citizens United, a lot of third-party money and super PAC money is coming into the political process. I think few Americans would deny that right now we have a government which to a significant degree represents the interest of the wealthy and the powerful rather than the needs of working families. So that, to answer your question, it deals with supporting candidates who have the guts to take on big money, who are going to fight for jobs for our people, who are going to fight to protect and expand the social safety net that so many of our elderly and kids depend upon, to deal with the trade issue right now and trade policies which has resulted in corporations shutting down in America, moving to China and abroad, deal with issues like raising the minimum wage. We know what a progressive agenda is. We know what needs to happen to rebuild the middle class, rebuild our infrastructure, create millions of jobs. The problem is that we have many people, certainly the majority in the House, too many in the Senate, who worry about the needs of the wealthy and powerful and not ordinary Americans.
How much time do we have, Shane? 2.5 minutes. Time for another call here. Chris in Natural Dam, Arkansas. You're on with Senator Sanders.
Oh, thanks. My question is, or first a statement, if there's millions of Americans who don't necessarily want a 9-to-5 job, they don't want to do grovel at personal business to come up with all that money, and if the government cares about the people, why doesn't it share land so people can have communes and take care of themselves? People who don't want anything from the government. The government's got millions of acres of national forest. It just seems like the communal living for a lot of people would be a much better option than prison or drug addiction or homelessness. I mean, I think there's millions of people just don't want a 9-to-5 job.
Got it, Chris. Let's let Bernie answer.
If your thought is that there are people who would like to work the land, kind of in a sense live outside of the normal economy and be self-sufficient doing that, and they need some help with some resources to get started on that project, I think that is something that state and federal government can look at.
Okay. Bernie, we have just a little over a minute here before we wrap up the show today, or at this hour of it.
Let me just mention a few of the issues that are coming down the pike. The most important issue is the debt ceiling issue, and everybody should understand that what that issue is about is Republican effort, along with some Democrats, to essentially cut back on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, other programs, which will cause devastating harm to a whole lot of people. There are ways to do deficit reduction that are fair and progressive. 1 out of 4 major corporations doesn't pay a nickel in federal income taxes. We're losing a huge amount of money by companies putting their money in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and other tax havens. There are ways that we can raise additional revenue without causing more problems for people who are already hurting. And that is an issue that's coming down the pike very, very shortly.
Bernie, thanks so much.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Great having you here.